one of the results of, we talk about the civil rights movement and the Black Power, that era as a second Reconstruction, right? And one of the results of that era was at least another attempt to legally enshrine the principle of race neutrality, right? At least there was a concerted effort to do this, right? And our system, our legal system, is ostensibly understood as colorblind, and yet, coming into our modern period, it creates enormous disparities, right? There's a report last year from the Sentencing Project that showed that Black Americans are incarcerated in state prisons at a rate that is nearly 5 times the rate for white Americans. So what are some of the mechanics that produce this racial disparity in an ostensibly colorblind system?
Yeah, great question. So, I think there are a few things that we want to talk about, but I think your question really points to how much authority rests in these different institutions like police and prosecutors. So, I think you could take any act, right, no matter how small or how heinous, and find somebody who is in prison for it, and find somebody else who did the exact same thing, who has never encountered the prison system in their life, who maybe is in the halls of power, right? Maybe they're in elected office, maybe they're a judge somewhere, right? And so I think the first thing, right, that we can see that there's nothing innate in any kind of action that results automatically in a kind of criminal punishment. You could look at what happens in this country versus other countries. Like there aren't crimes that are uniquely American, right? There aren't crimes that are uniquely Seattle, right? Or uniquely Miami, right? So all of this is about the kind of decisions to punish, and who decides who gets punished, and for what and for how long. So I think your question on the Sentencing Project has been so excellent in tracking a lot of points us to a few different institutions. First, it points us to police, right, and where are police powers aggregated and allocated. So I went to high school in a well-to-do suburb in South Florida. There were lots of drugs in that high school, and I don't know any of the any of the kids who bullied me. Like none of them had any legal repercussions for doing a lot of illegal drugs, and that has everything to do with geography, right? About where police resources are allocated, what neighborhoods are considered to be quote unquote high crime or considered to be dangerous, and therefore garner this kinds of police attention. So I think that's our first step, right? That impoverished, and particularly impoverished communities of color, and particularly impoverished communities of color have been targeted by local, state, and national policing, police agencies for the most serious and sustained attention. Not all of them, but a number of those arrests then find their ways into the hands of a local prosecutor, right? And prosecutors for the last 50 years of mass incarceration have built careers off of proving that they're the toughest on crime, right? Whether that crime is serious crime or is sleeping in the streets, right? But it's sort of targeting the most vulnerable people from often the most vulnerable or the most abandoned communities for punishment. And then I think the larger kind of apparatus has been supported and encouraged by a number of political figures who have again made their careers on tough on crime politics. I think what's interesting now, and we'll talk about this later, but I think we're in an interesting moment now where we had 3 or 4 decades of people making their careers by showing that they were the most tough on crime. And I think for a time there was some measure of public support for that. And now I think there's less public support for it, but the people in charge are still very wedded to a kind of law and order politics.